Welcome back to the Golden State with Mates post-game live after the Warriors suffer a rather embarrassing 125-85 defeat to the Boston Celtics at Chase Center on MLK Day. Happy MLK Day to those of you in America and anyone else that celebrates, but not a great day for Golden State, it must be said. Look, I don't want to look at this game too much in isolation simply because uh, you're without Draymond Green, you're without Jonathan Kuminga, you're without Brandon Pajemski, you're without Kyle Anderson. Warriors fairly depleted. You're coming up against the defending champions who, yes, have been in some poor form recently, but it's a game you're expected to lose. And in all honesty, the Warriors probably just should have rested Steph Curry from this game, who obviously turned his ankle on Saturday against the Wizards, and he's also dealing with a pretty obvious thumb issue at the moment, which again was a bit of a problem for him in this game. So I don't want to necessarily look at this game in isolation, but what this game did provide was perhaps the perfect contrast between what is a methodical, beautifully executed roster build that the Celtics and Brad Stevens have delivered over the last couple of years, and a roster build that is just so deeply flawed from Mike Dunleavy Jr. And he's the one that's in my sights, having watched this game. Like, you can see whatever you want that happened on the floor in this game. And I know Steve Kerr often gets so much criticism for the different lineups that he puts out. And in some ways, that's rightly so. But he's limited with the roster that he's got. And the biggest thing I have for Mike Dunleavy Jr. is it's actually hilarious. It's genuinely funny how you can possibly build a roster that is deficient in both shooting and size. And that's the biggest thing for Golden State. How can you be so bad in both areas? Like, I can understand one, right? And I think the Warriors have lacked size over the past few years, and they've got away with it, it must be said. But they've always had Steph Curry, who, when you've got the greatest three-point shooter in the history of the game, that immediately gives you a major leg up in terms of, the shooting department and what you should have in on the roster with that element. And they just don't. Like, I was looking, just watching this game, and you see, Jaylen Brown 6'7", 6'8", Jason Tatum 6'7", 6'8", Kristaps Porzingis 7'3". Hell, Sam Hauser 6'8". Like, when was the last time the Warriors acquired a guy who was literally capable of, being 6'7", 6'8", and a semi-reliable three-point shooting threat, right? Who doesn't get burnt on the defensive end. Like, every player the Warriors go out and get is flawed in some way. And there is enough talent around the NBA right now that it shouldn't be that difficult to go get a 6'7", 6'8" wing who can literally be at least a 35 to 40% three-point shooter. It can't be that difficult, right? And the Warriors front court, I know, completely depleted without Green, Kuminga, but those guys can't shoot anyway. Draymond can shoot a little bit. Kuminga can shoot a little bit. They're not respected from beyond the arc. Neither is Kyle Anderson. Like, those power forward options, yes, they're going to help when they return, but it's not like they bring a significant shooting threat whatsoever. So it's just the contrast between these roster builds from two teams that met in the 2022 NBA Finals less than 3 years ago. It's extraordinary. It's painful to watch, but it's downright hilarious how a general manager can put together a team that is deficient in size and shooting. Maybe one or the other, but not both. And so to me, like Mike Dunleavy Jr., who gained so many plaudits for, the first 15 games of the season, and look at Buddy Hield, what a signing, he's on fire, and D'Anthony Melton looks great. And I think the Melton signing was good. But now, instead of the blame going largely on Steve Kerr and perhaps players individually, like, it has to go on Mike Dunleavy Jr. What is this roster? What is it? What is it good at? Like, clearly they try and be good defensively, and they are a top 10 team in defense. But, like, aside from that, offensively, this is a disaster. And I tweeted out during the game, I think in the second quarter, that, when the Warriors, they shot, 14 of 51 from three-point range in this game. So they're firing up from deep. Like, they're firing them up. They're not hesitant there, but, like, they don't have any good three-point shooters necessarily. Like, Buddy Hield hasn't been a good three-point shooter recently. Lindy Waters hasn't been a good three-point shooter on the season. Moody wasn't great in this game from three. What did he go? 3 of 9 or 3 of 10? Right. Like Wiggins goes 1 of 11 in this game. I don't understand what this team is, what this roster is right now. And they'll still win some games and maybe they get into the playing tournament. Heck, maybe they make the playoffs, but I just don't know. Like, it's just, I don't know. There's nothing to look at offensively. And that's the thing is, at least you could be excited if this team was, putting up 120 points and losing 130 to 120. At least there'd be some excitement. It's so tough to watch with the offensive issues. And sorry, to go back what I tweeted out during the second quarter, get a guy like Vucevic or a stretch five, and yeah, cool, they might have some defensive concerns. But heck, play Quentin Post a little bit more, and they might have some defensive concerns. But your best defense is usually going to be if you put the ball in the basket offensively and you can actually set up on defense rather than missing all these shots, having to try and fight for offensive rebounds, and then the other team gets out in transition. Like, I think the Warriors' defense would get significantly better just by actually having another guy like a Vucevic who can give you 20 points and actually put the ball in the basket and make the other team take the ball out from the baseline rather than getting a running start and getting out in transition. So, I don't know. Just give me someone. Give me someone. It doesn't have to be the superstar player. I think we can all agree that superstar player is not going to be forthcoming before the trade deadline, and that therefore this Warrior team is not going to go on a deep playoff run, right? I think we can all acknowledge that. But go and get someone who's capable offensively, who can put the ball in the basket, who can be a threat, who can potentially open things up for Steph and Kuminga and Wiggins and those types. Just go and do that. Make your team slightly better, because it's not, oftentimes we look at it as championship or bust, and that's been the thing about the Warriors is that, Mike Dunleavy Jr. said it before the start of the season, we're not going to make a move just for the sake of making a move. And I think they retain that. And look, I understand that, right? What's the point of, dealing a couple of championship veterans in Kevon Looney and Gary Payton II if it's only going to make you slightly better? And instead of, making the 10 seed, you actually make the 8 seed and you get booed out in the first round of the playoffs. What's really the difference there? Well, from a fan perspective, it's got to be more than championship or bust or a deep playoff run or bust. Like, we watch these games to get some enjoyment out of them. And right now, you just don't get any enjoyment because it's such a grueling, arduous task on offense. And as I said a few episodes ago, like, you feel so bad for Steph because of the pressure that is forced upon him, because opposing defenses can just load up on him because there's no other offensive threats. There's often 2-3 guys on the floor who are a non-spacing threat to the opposing team are just happy to leave wide open and far away from distance. So, I don't know, just the contrast in this game between the roster builds when you've got a Warrior lineup starting unit who have 3 guys, Steph, GP2, Dennis Schroeder, who are all 6'3" or below. And then you look across the court and there's a Boston starting 5 that are all 6'4" or above, including a center who's 7'3", who's equally adept, going out to the 3-point line and drilling threes from beyond the arc as he is, protecting the rim. The Warriors have got a 6'9" guy in Trace Jackson Davis, who's multiple inches smaller and yet doesn't have any offense beyond the restricted circle, essentially. So, like, what are we doing here? Like, the contrast, and I understand, like, Boston's the blueprint. That is the blueprint for roster building in the NBA, but it doesn't negate the fact that this Warrior roster is deeply flawed, and to have deficiency in both size and shooting, it's inexcusable. I can excuse 1 or 2 of those elements. To have both, that's inexcusable. That is horrible, horrible decision-making from your general manager. It just is. It blatantly is. Okay, and you can look at the moves in isolation, and you can argue that some of these moves were actually in isolation. They were fine. But on the whole, that's how we've got to base the roster on its entirety, and it's horrible. It just downright is. Anyway, that's my rant for this game. Again, I'm not surprised the Warriors lost. Disappointing they lost by 40, absolutely. But more so, just looking bigger picture on this, that game was a perfect illustration of the contrast between a well-executed roster build and a deeply flawed, dare I say, horrible roster build for this season at least, and moving forward, it must be said. few of your guys' comments. I apologize for not getting to them sooner, but I just wanted to get that out there. Mike Dunleavy Jr., you deserve some criticism for how this team is playing. GSO says, glad I stopped watching at halftime because I thought it'd be another one of those nights. Yeah, the Warriors put up 39 points in the first half. It was fairly competitive for the first 7-8 minutes, and then Steph went out, and then the game was done. I think the Warriors, they were +2 in Steph's minutes in the first half and -17 in the 6 or 7 minutes he was off the floor. Just typical Warrior issues, really. Mark says, where the hell was Wiggins? I don't know, maybe watching his highlights from Saturday's game. It went from feast to famine for him. He had 31 and 11 rebounds on Saturday against the Wizards, led the Warriors to victory there, and then he comes out and has 4 points on 1 of 11 shooting and only had 3 rebounds, nearly played 24 minutes. Just a non-existent game from him. Fendex says, when Steph got benched in the final 3 minutes of the first quarter, things fell apart. Celtics went on a 14-1 run. Yeah, I think it was 16-1 at one point if you start from early in the second quarter as well. It just the game got away from the Warriors and it just got worse from there. I want to say as well, I think I tweeted out, Buddy Hield might have had during that stretch, those last few minutes of the first quarter, Buddy Hield might have had the worst 2 or 3 minute sequence I can remember from a Warrior player. It was despicable. It was, again, if you don't laugh, you'll cry. It was horrific. So he gets fouled on a 3-point shot, and you think, okay, cool. They go to a timeout and an ad break, and they come back, and you think, Buddy Hield, okay, he'll probably go 3 of 3 at the line. He's a pretty good free throw shooter. Well, he misses 2 and goes 1 of 3, and you're like, oh, well, okay, that's not ideal. Next offensive possession, he misses a wide open 3 in transition. The one after that, I think he missed. He came off a screen and missed another wide open 3 where he's actually able to get his feet set. Missed that one too. And then the next possession, I think he drove, got into some traffic, ended up turning the ball over with a kick ball that he just kicked the ball away. So there was basically 1 of 3 from the free throw line, 2 missed open 3s, a turnover. On the next defensive possession after that as well, he left. Horford caught the ball in the paint. And if Al Horford, he's not necessarily a scorer at this stage of his career. If he wants to go up and make a layup, whatever. Instead, Buddy Hield quickly comes in to try and double team, leaves Sam Hauser, who's an elite 3-point shooter, wide open in the corner. Sam Hauser drills a 3. He then got lucky again because he lost Hauser again the following possession, and Hauser had another wide open corner 3, which fortunately he missed. But that was that sequence on both ends of the floor was, oh my goodness, it was horrific. It was so bad. I can't remember a worse 2 or 3 minute sequence by a veteran Warrior player. I don't know. Talking of Buddy, Knox says, please get Buddy off the team. Yeah, you just have to, again, this roster is so flawed that they have to rely upon him and his 3-point shooting. And when he's not playing well, it's a disaster. But, what are you going to do? Who are you going to play over him? Who knows? Young West says, without Steph, we might be the least talented roster in the league. Yeah, I could agree with that. It's hard to argue. Maybe Brooklyn. Brooklyn's best players like Cam Johnson, but they're actively they traded Mikal Bridges, they traded Schroeder, they traded Dorian Finney-Smith. They're sellers trying to be bad, trying to be one of the worst teams in the league. The Warriors are still trying to be good, trying to be a playoff team, so you can't really compare the two. GSW says, I'm going to keep preaching Quentin post minutes, hit his shots, good screens. It would be nice to see him and Dennis on offense. Rebounds, haven't seen much of his defense though. Yeah, the defense is going to be a question mark. But again, if it opens up your offense, then your best defense might be from actually putting the ball in the basket. He was the Warriors' 3rd leading scorer in this game. Steph had 18 on 16 shots, not efficient. But again, hard to blame him. Moody had 13 points on 13 shots. I think he was 5 of 13, got some run in the fourth quarter. And then Post was Golden State's 3rd leading scorer with 9 points. I think he had, made a 3. 4 rebounds, entered late in the third quarter, and then played the last 13 minutes. From there, some positive signs again, but I don't know how much you can take out of it when, it's coming in garbage time. I always, it's difficult to necessarily evaluate whether he should be getting rotation minutes moving forward, but you understand the idea of it in terms of having a stretch 5 out there and a guy that can actually put, he does put the ball in the basket. Right, he's 4 of 8. He's not afraid to put shots up, which is part of the Warrior issue as well. Sometimes is guys like GP2, Draymond, Slow-Mo when he's fit and available as well. Some of these guys are actually afraid. Looney, TJD. they're not shot takers, let alone shot makers. And Quinton Post, like, he's not afraid. He'll put shots up. Now, sometimes they won't look great. Like, he was only 1 of 4 from 3, but like, he's got some offensive talent and probably more offensive talent than half this roster, which is quite frightening, it must be said. GSO says trade Buddy Hield for 3-and-D players. But like, you'd have to give up genuine draft assets for that. Because Buddy Hield, again, I'm not sure too many teams are taking on that contract. Knox says, Buddy can't even make wide open ones. What does he do for the team? Yep, good point. GSO says, Buddy Hield cycle had to be true. Buddy Hield, I mean, he does deserve the criticism, don't get me wrong, but he's also the scapegoat. Like, when we come after these massive losses, it's always Buddy Hield. He's always the talking point, which is maybe a tad bit unfair, but it's also hard to disagree because of how bad it's been in most of these games recently, must be said. Then Nick says, the funny thing is in that first half, the Celtics were shooting bad. Imagine if they were firing. We should stop tracking threes. We were 1 of 16 in the first quarter. Yeah, the Warriors were 1 of 16 at one point. I think Schroeder made their second 3, but I mean, they shot 26% from beyond the arc for the game. Oh, it was disgusting. It's a tough watch. And that's the thing. Like, yeah, okay, you go out and get a guy like Vucevic, but it's not catapulting you into championship contention. It's not catapulting you into a deep playoff run. But you know what? It's making your product a little bit better. It's making the enjoyment for fans just a little bit greater. Is that not actually worth something? Like, is that not actually so like, when I understand when you say, oh, we're not going to make the move because it's pointless, we're not going to win a championship. But if it's championship or bust every season, then I don't know. I think that's not necessarily the best way to look at it. Now, I can understand if you go out, like, you don't want to make a move that then inhibits your ability to go and make that potential championship changing move for you and that franchise altering move. I understand that. But I don't think adding a guy like Vucevic does that. Like, I think you're still going to have the same flexibility in the offseason. So just go out and get someone who can put the ball in the basket and just make the enjoyment for fans a little bit better, even if the team actually isn't that. Again, I'd rather lose these games 130, 120. At least you can see you guys putting the ball in the basket and there's some offensive production, right? Knox says, trade GP2, Buddy, Lindy, Moody for more capable role players. Then Nick says, Steph said he doesn't want to trade the future. Well, to be fair, there is no future. I mean, it's easy to say that when Kuminga's out. Like, Kuminga, before he got injured, was on a tear. He was averaging 25 points a game in his previous 6, nearly 8 rebounds a game, good efficiency. So he's your one, and Pods is out as well. So it's easy to say that when those two guys are out. I suppose the future really is your draft picks, and we saw was it the inside the NBA crew during halftime saying that the Warriors should go to the draft and rebuild this, from through young players rather than trading for veteran players. The issue is the Warriors' drafting history over the last 10 years hasn't been great. Like, Wiseman obviously the big one. Now, Kuminga and Moody, okay, they're still on the team. Kuminga looks like he could still become a star maybe, but there are clearly guys behind those selections that you'd prefer to take. Like Franz Wagner went the pick after Kuminga. You'd prefer him right now. Heck, you'd prefer a guy like Trey Murphy III, Alperen Şengün. I'm not sure how good he necessarily would have developed in the Warriors system, but he's a guy right now that you'd clearly prefer. Like, there's heaps of guys. Herb Jones taken pick 35, I think, in that draft. You'd prefer over Moses Moody, right? Murphy and Şengün were both taken after Moody. So the Warriors, yes, they could just go and invest in the draft and whatnot, but that actually hasn't really, like, they've done that for the last 5 years and hasn't really helped them. So I don't know. GSO says, honestly, we've been missing Clay. Yeah, I think so. Just his perimeter shooting threat. I think he's more of a threat than Buddy Hield. He's less of a defensive liability than Buddy Hield because at least Clay has some size. Like, Clay, post injuries, he's actually like not the worst post defender. Like, you can put him on 3s and 4s, and yes, his lateral quickness isn't there anymore, but he can be somewhat stout against 3s and 4s. And Buddy Hield's just a nightmare defensively. So what are you gonna do? Bobby Hoo says Curry is going out just like Kobe did. Hard to disagree. Like this Warrior team is currently better than that Laker team of the last couple of Kobe years, but it's not much better. Let's put it that way. Carlton says Steph, Wiggins, Kuminga, Santos, NV. I'm assuming that means Vucevic. So what, you're getting rid of Draymond? Or you're just saying why he's out injured? I suppose, yeah, I don't know. The Gee minutes were fun to begin with, but I still look at him as a player and think he's not a guy in his second year that you want to be, relying upon for consistent minutes, I don't think. Knox says this team is actually hard to watch. It is, which again is why just go make a move to make the teams even slightly better. Just get a little bit more enjoyment out of it, please. Dendex says, with this current team, not including the injured guys, what is your starting five? Steph, I think Schroeder still needs to start. Wiggins, don't know. Obviously, Trace is in there, but then there's got to be, maybe Gee has to start because at least he's got some size. Like he's 6'8", and he's a theoretical. I know he only went 1 of 6 from 3-point range, but he's a theoretical 3-point shooter. Either him or Moody. I don't want to see Buddy Hield, and I don't want to see GP2. So it's got to be, I think it's got to be Steph, Schroeder, Wiggins, Trace, and one of Moody or Gee, which is, I think you probably give it to Moody just because, I think he deserves the opportunity more so than a second-year Gee Santos, but they're probably the two options. Knox says, I do think we'll get slightly better once we get healthy, but it might be too late by then. Yeah, which is exactly why I've been advocating for a trade like now, not at the February 6th deadline because the season could be over by that point. The only saving grace you'd say is that, okay, the Warriors' schedule before the deadline is actually pretty good, so maybe they can still eke out some wins here and still be around about in the mix come the trade deadline. GSW says, I didn't follow the NBA much in 2020, but taking a man that didn't play in college second overall is crazy due to injuries. I don't think Wiseman wasn't out in Memphis because of injuries. He got done for the Penny Hardaway thing where he was ruled ineligible because Penny Hardaway paid his parents or something. Something happened there that made Wiseman ineligible. So I don't think it was because of injuries that he necessarily missed that season. And what I will say is 2020 was weird in terms of COVID, obviously, and therefore the whole lead up and the draft process before the draft took place. So again, I'm not defending the decision. Right now, you could have Tyrese Halliburton or basically anyone would be better than Wiseman. That draft's pretty bad. So I'm not even sure it's the Wiseman one. It's probably more so the following year where Kuminga and Moody, again, are still on the team, but there's guys taken after them that are very, very talented and more proven and better players right now. Swin says, this team is not even good enough to be the worst team. They are a G League team. They just really do stink. It's horrible to watch. You don't have to mortgage your future. Just get rid of some of the guys. Go get Vooch. Sorry, but trade Looney, GP2, Slow-Mo, and second-round picks. That will match the money. Yep, that's what I've been crying out for weeks. You're preaching to the wrong man here because that's the kind of trade that I've been clamoring for weeks on end here. It feels like over a month now, essentially, where I've just said, yep, Looney, GP2, one of Anderson or Hield, or maybe it's Moody, and you go get Vucevic. Been saying it. But you know what? The Warriors will probably do it. But you know what? They'll do it in the last 12 hours before the trade deadline. And again, as we spoke about before, maybe the season's dead and buried by then. And not only dead and buried, but there is clearly, and we've seen this with Schroeder, and Schroeder still isn't acclimatized to the team, and maybe he never will be, but Vucevic, he does make sense as an obvious fit, particularly on offense, but it'll take some time. And unfortunately, the later you make the trade, the less time you've got to actually get Vucevic acclimatized. Now, he is under contract for next season, so maybe the entirety of the rest of this season would just be about, hey, let's get this guy into the system, getting him acclimatized to our offense and our defense as well, and then we'll come out and start next season and see what happens. Maybe that is the case, but still, it's not an ideal scenario whatsoever. Knox says, what is a fun team to watch right now? I was thinking the Nuggets, but I don't know anything better than watching the Warriors. The good teams. The good teams play good basketball. Boston may be a little bit too 3-point centric, and people getting a little bit bored of that. Like the Thunder with all their young players. I really enjoy watching the young talent around the league. I like watching young talent and the storylines of watching young, not just young players and young athletes, but young people making their way in the league and trying to thrive. And therefore, I like watching that with Kuminga. Like Kuminga's probably, after Steph, he's clearly the player on the Warrior roster I look forward to and enjoy watching the most. Even when like Quentin Post enters the game, right? In this one, late in the third quarter, the Warriors are down by 30 plus. But I actually get some excitement. It's like, okay, cool. I've got something to watch now. Quentin Post on the floor. Now let me watch this. And I'll actually tune into it. Even though I've kind of tuned out because the Warriors are down by 30 plus. I see Quentin Post and I sit up in my chair. Oh, okay, I'll watch this. So watching young players is, I get a real kick out of that, I suppose. And so therefore, watching a team like the Thunder who have got a bunch of young talent, bunch of young players, not only that, but they're very, very good. Like they're a fun team to watch. The Shea free throw shooting, foul baiting stuff aside, watching Ant Edwards on Minnesota, although he might have got a bit 3-point happy this season. The Cavs with like Mobley and Garland on top of Mitchell and Allen, they're obviously like all the good teams are like good to watch, right? So Houston at the moment, I know they surprise lost to the Pistons today, but they're pretty exciting to watch with all their young players. And again, they're a good team. So that's kind of who I liked. And the Spurs, like whenever you have the opportunity to watch Wemby, that's experience. That's usually an enjoyable experience as well, unless he's playing the Warriors, of course. GSW says, I don't mind the Kuminga and Moody picks though, because at least they're in the rotation. Yeah, but I don't know. Like you prefer, it's very hard to evaluate and make draft comparisons because you just don't know how these guys would have been developed in the Warrior system and on teams that, a Warrior team that's continued to try and be a playoff team over the last couple of years rather than, Şengün going to Houston and just being able to play through all his mistakes and the Rockets winning 20 games for like 3 straight years and being afforded that opportunity. Or a guy like Franz Wagner going to the Magic and the Magic being crap for a couple of years and him being able to play through mistakes and learn through that before he and they take the leap together, essentially. So that to me, like it's hard to make too many draft comparisons because a guy, some of these guys might look great right now in their current teams, like Wagner, like Şengün, like Trey Murphy, whatever else, but they could have easily been shuffled back into, deep rotation roles where they're, like a Moody where, some nights you're playing 20 minutes, other nights you're playing 10 minutes, other nights you're DNPs, and all of a sudden you're in your 4th year and you're still not really sure what your role is and the playing time's still going up and down, so it's hard. GSW says, I love seeing the young guys play. Thendix says, I think I saw Steph guarding Porzingis. Yes, so that's the thing as well. Like, again, not only the shooting contrast between the two teams, but the size. And I spoke about it before in terms of the starting lineups. And therefore, like, if you've got 5 guys 6'4" or above, and you've got a 7'3" unicorn on the floor, and you've got 2 wings who are 6'7", 6'8", and the other team has 3 guys 6'3" or under, then I don't care how decent defenders GP2 and Schroeder are. Like that automatically brings just a mountain of mismatches, particularly when your offense is struggling and you can't get matched up defensively on the other side of the floor. So all of a sudden, Porzingis is in the paint calling for the ball, and the 6'3" Steph, who's a full foot shorter than him, is guarding him. And then all of a sudden, okay, well, we're gonna have to double team here, and we come and double team, and they kick it out, and there's 4 shooters on the floor. 5 shooters on the floor if you want to include Porzingis, right? So I don't know, just the size and the shooting contrast it's ridiculous. Swin says bench Buddy Hield, he sucks. Yeah, like I agree with that, but Lindy Waters doesn't enthrall me too much. Moses is playing like as a 4 at the moment. Like, what's the alternative? What is the alternative to Buddy Hield minutes? Maybe, when Podziemski comes back and if he can actually be consistent as a 3-point shooter, maybe that'll eliminate the Buddy Hield minutes potentially. Conquer them. That's how I'm going to pronounce it. It says Hield is a perfect example of stats can be misleading. Man, he's struggling. Yeah. You summed it up. No need to add to that. Also says Moody was the PF. That's just nasty work. Yeah, it's something like you're not usually, in fairness to Steve Kerr and in fairness to Mike Dunleavy Jr., you're not necessarily going to go into the season thinking, yeah, at one point, all our 3 power forward options are going to be unavailable because of injury. Like, that's pretty rare. You can't build a roster thinking that, oh yeah, the top 3 guys at that position are going to be out. Like, it's pretty hard to criticize them for that. But in saying that, it'd be nice if there are just a couple of like versatile 6'7", 6'8" guys who you could actually throw into the power forward position and they wouldn't be undersized. Like, Moody is 6'5", 6'6". Like, he's decent. He's reasonably strong, but he is still undersized, particularly against a Celtics team with Tatum, Brown, Porzingis, Horford coming off the bench. Yeah, it is what it is. Berserk Monk says, I think the Warriors are now the get-right team in the league. When teams are struggling and they need a win, they're going to be circling the matchup versus the Warriors. Yes, possibly. We said that after the Raptors game, didn't we? They'd entered with like 1 win in their last 17 games and then all of a sudden get a win over Golden State. Daniel says, we are obviously multiple moves away from contention, but in your opinion, what's the one area we need more of? Size, shooting, a secondary ball handler, creator, or something else entirely? Just a combination of size and shooting. Just, again, a guy that is a front court player, is at least 6'7", 6'8", and can be a respected three-point shooter. Again, go get a stretch 5, Vucevic, Kelly Olynyk, John Collins. I don't know. It doesn't even have to be a center necessarily, although I think that's probably the ideal area. But I don't know, just someone who can bring some three-point shooting to the floor without, alleviating that by being a defensive concern like Buddy Hield is, like Lindy Waters can be. Although, those guys can fight defensively, but they're just like they're outgunned. They're just undersized. Simple as that. See you later says time to tank. I don't know. The only good thing about the Warriors is there's some dysfunction around other teams in the West. Like Minnesota lost today. Phoenix got blown out by Cleveland. The Mavs are obviously really struggling without Luka. They lost to the Hornets. Clay struggled again. So, as they kept saying on the broadcast, like if you win 4 or 5 games in a row, then all of a sudden you might actually find yourself in the 6 seed, 6, 7 seed. So maybe not all is lost from that standpoint. Knox says, this was a scheduled loss. I don't know why they played Curry. Should have just rested him for the Kings. Well, it was a nationally televised game, wasn't it? And I don't think you're allowed to rest your stars for nationally televised games. But in saying that, like Steph did pretty clearly roll his ankle on Saturday against the Wizards. He pretty clearly has a banged up thumb at the moment. It wouldn't have been difficult to just prove that, hey, he's actually got an injury. We're keeping him out of this game. Berserk Monk says, when's the last time the front office actually used a first round pick to genuinely improve the roster for Steph? I don't know. Were they thinking that they were improving the roster by trading Jordan Poole and a first round pick for Chris Paul last year? Sorry, the year before now 2023. Did they think they were improving the roster then? I don't think they thought they were improving the roster. I think they thought that they would improve the roster in the long term by having the financial flexibility. I think that's what they were. It wasn't an immediate upgrade to help Steph, that's for sure. Daniel Hall says, Miles Turner. I love Miles Turner. Absolutely. He'd be the perfect option for the Warriors right now. I just don't think he's going to be available. Bobby says, I would love to get one of the Thompson twins on this team. Either one would be a really good fit. It won't happen, but what's your thoughts on the twins? Yeah, very athletic, talented young players. There were reports before the 2023 draft that the Warriors were going to potentially trade Kuminga for a top 10 pick and target one of the Thompson twins. I vividly remember writing about that. Like that happened. Didn't happen in the end, obviously, in reality, but that was a thing. Daniel says, would Indiana turn down 2 or 3 first-round picks for him? Seems like it'd be worth it because of age and skill set. Well, it wouldn't take 2 or 3 first-round picks. Well, it might from the Pacers' perspective, and then they might do it. But he's a free agent in the offseason, so you wouldn't be giving up 2 or 3 first-round picks for a guy who is not a star by any means and who can become a free agent in the offseason and could just walk in 3 months' time. And like, he's another aspect of like, what's he doing to you for this season? Like I said before, like I want this team to get better and I want the Warriors to go out and make a move that's better. But again, like I do appreciate that it can't be in the face of hurting your chances to go and actually make a bigger move in the future, and trading 2 to 3 first-round picks for Miles Turner would do that. I think trading one or pods maybe would be fine, but I'm not going to be trading 2 or 3 first-round picks for Miles Turner. Conquer Them says the offense is predicated on jump shots off motion and screens, and we don't have consistent shooters, and that doesn't help the defense on the other end. Absolutely true. Daniel says, I don't mind overpaying for young players like Zion, Turner, or Lowry because at least they can age with the team. Yeah, Markkanen would have been perfect. Absolutely perfect. Even though he hasn't had a great season with Utah necessarily, he was just the perfect Warrior player because he did provide that combination of size and elite shooting that the Warriors desperately lack. And this is nothing new, right? Go back and listen to my episodes during the offseason. The Warriors' lack of size and shooting was always an issue. And the 12-3 start was a mirage for the real issues that this team has. And it dates back to the offseason and the moves they made there. Lowry would have been perfect. Hindsight, yeah, you put pods in the deal. Turner, he's not really a young player anymore. He's like in his prime, and he's not a star. He's a very good player, don't get me wrong, but he's not a star. I don't think he's the franchise-altering piece, particularly not for the Warriors. Zion can be, and if you can get Zion at a cheap price, maybe you do it. Alrighty, I'm going to finish up there, guys. We've been going for over 36 minutes. I appreciate all your guys' comments. Again, not a game that I look at too much in isolation, aside from it being the perfect illustration, as I said before, of a very good, the blueprint of how rosters should be built, really, in terms of Brad Stevens and the Boston Celtics, and the deplorable way that Mike Dunleavy Jr. has assembled this Warrior roster while having the flexibility to make moves. Like, it's not like they're locked into this team, right? They have flexibility. They're not an apron team, right? They're not, limited by the punitive restrictions on apron teams. They have a bunch of first-round picks. They have a bunch of expiring contracts, right? They have the flexibility. It's not like the Suns. Like, the Suns right now are struggling, but the Suns, they're kind of just stuck with what they've got. And even then, they went out and got Nick Richards, right? Saw a center deficiency and said, yeah, we need an upgrade at center. Nick Richards isn't a big name by any means, but he's an upgrade on Mason Plumlee and Yusuf Nurkic, right? The Warriors are not locked into this. So why do we keep rolling this out? Because it's unenjoyable. It's an unenjoyable product that the Warriors are rolling out at the moment. Again, thank you very much, guys. Thanks to those of you who might be watching on replay afterwards, or if you're listening via the podcast feed. If you haven't subscribed already to the YouTube channel, that would be greatly appreciated. You can follow me at POK252. It's POK252 on X/Twitter. We're also on Instagram and TikTok, Golden State with Mates as well, although TikTok's just like banned in America now. I'm assuming it's coming back with Trump in charge now. Can't say I got up at 2:30 in the morning and watched the inauguration, but good luck to you for those in America. And good luck to Donald Trump as well, I suppose. All righty, thanks again, guys. Warriors play, when do they play? Wednesday against the Kings. Might be back for a post-game live after that. Cheers.